30 seconds to put the question.
Mr. I'm very interested in a specific aspect of what might happen if there was a no-deal Brexit. There were comments in the media last week that it might lead to a circumstance where in ports of Rotterdam or Calais elsewhere, goods coming from Ireland would be checked there. If we weren't applying a border, hard border on the north-south border, that might be an eventuality. I'm very interested to hear what preparations or what the plans are from the department should that eventuality arise.
Thank you, Deputy, for raising this issue. My department has conducted extensive research on a wide range of issues affecting businesses in relation to Brexit. In February 2018, my department published an independent expert study undertaken by Copenhagen Economics entitled Ireland and the Impact of Brexit. This study examined the implications of Brexit for the Irish economy and trade and quantified the impact of possible new barriers to trade which might emerge as a result of Brexit. The suite of Brexit supports that have been put in place for businesses through the enterprise agencies under my department remit have been informed by this report, as well as other studies and analysis undertaken across government. In relation to Irish exports moving directly from Ireland to continental Europe, Brexit will have no impact in terms of new or additional customs controls. The single market will continue to apply. For goods transiting through the UK using the land bridge, there may be implications as a result of a no-deal Brexit. To facilitate the import and export of goods, the Government's preparedness and contingency planning for Brexit has from the start included issues relating to the continued effective use of the UK land bridge, and this is a priority for the Government given its importance for Irish exporters and importers as a means of access to the rest of the single market. Issues around the optimal arrangements and necessary infrastructure for customs and related inspections at Irish ports and airports are primarily for my colleagues, the Minister for Finance and the Revenue Commissioners and the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport. Retaining the effective use of the land bridge post-Brexit has been discussed at both political and official level with both the the UK and the EU. As a result of these contacts, the importance of maintaining the land bridge has been recognised through the Protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland in the draft withdrawal agreement, which reaffirms the commitment of the UK to facilitate the efficient and timely transit through the UK of goods moving from Ireland to another EU member state or another country or vice versa. In a no-deal scenario, however, it is anticipated that the land bridge, at least in the initial period, may be subject to delays, and this, of course, will have a knock-on impact on goods travelling to and from Ireland.
You say in response that there's no prospect of controls going into the likes of Rotterdam or Calais for goods coming directly from Ireland. But if I can quote the papers, I hope I'm not out of lodge here, but that the papers last week quoted the Taoiseach directly saying that that was a possibility. So, and the likes of Dan O'Brien in the Irish Independent has raised real concerns as to the effect of that, effectively excluding us from the single market, in effect, that would have on Irish business. Now, can I ask you, have you had any discussions with your European colleagues or your department with European officials on that prospect? If the Taoiseach says it's a possibility, what preparations are your department making, or how can you reassure us that that's not a possibility should a hard Brexit come to pass? And if it did, what are has that Copenhagen's economic study you said, has it looked at the economic consequences if that did arise, given that the Taoiseach himself says it's a possibility?
Well, can I just assure the Deputy that there is no consideration of any such move within government, that there would be checks on the ports in the EU, I think perhaps there may have been some misunderstanding there, but there is no consideration for that. Our issue here in terms of checks is it the land bridge between us and the UK. I have met with Commissioner Vestager just last week, but she's the competition Competition Commissioner, and I did discuss with her, the challenges that Irish businesses, both SMEs and large firms, will face when the UK leaves the European Union, and the need for appropriate and timely state supports. And the Commissioner did acknowledge the high exposure of Irish businesses to the UK market, and she did assure me that the necessary resources at Commission level will be available to facilitate a swift response if urgent action is required by the Government. And in terms of the ports, there's a lot of work going in at the minute in expanding the capacity at the Irish ports to address the challenges that are coming down the road for us.
Thank you, Minister. I know it's an important issue, and you will have a final minute. Deputy Ryan.
If we are to have a no-deal scenario, and if it seems clear from the Government we're determined that doesn't see border checks coming in on the north-south border, where would the checks be that would reassure our European colleagues that all goods coming from Ireland are complying with single market rules? Would the checks in those instances go in Rosslare before goods leave Ireland going directly to the continent, or would it more likely be at the continental end, or are we saying there would be no checks on goods coming from Ireland to the continent, if we put the land bridge and the UK travel aside, which is a separate issue, but on goods going directly from Ireland to the continent in the event of a no-deal Brexit and the event that we're not applying checks on the Irish Northern Ireland border, where would the checks take place?
Just to say that the Government has been consistent and clear in saying that we will not accept a hard border on this island. The EU and UK both accept that avoiding a hard border is essential, and this has been repeatedly reaffirmed by the Prime Minister and the EU. So if the withdrawal agreement does not enter into force, our objective will be, of course, more difficult to achieve. We are not planning for a hard border. Ireland and the EU have a clear responsibility for and economic interest in the protection of the single market and the customs union, and the UK, of course, has WTO responsibilities. And yes, there are going to be obviously checks on the ports and at the airports, and we have recruited a considerable, over 400 customs officials, and that continues. I know that the Department of Agriculture has stepped up its recruitment of additional staff for SPS checks and such things, because at the end of the day we have to protect the integrity of the EU customs union and the single market.
Okay.